Welcome to episode 50 of Radio Omnicore. I'm Colleen McClintock, your host, and we're so thrilled to be hosting Teamble for our 50th episode, a real milestone for Radio Omnicore. Teamble is the founder of Teamble, a really useful software that is embedded in Microsoft and Slack that helps you engage your organizations. We've just recently launched it at Omnicore. And I think you're going to find this podcast really interesting to see how Teamble and his team have come up with a way of creating engagement and recognition remotely online. So welcome everyone to Radio Omnicore. We're really excited to host Teamble from Teamble. We've got Hilton in his usual spot as co-host, and this is episode 50, a big milestone for Radio Omnicore. So it's so exciting to have a nice conversation about your successful journey as the founder.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Welcome, Hilton.
Thanks. I'm interested to grill Teamble on his history and his entrepreneurship and just how he pulled the whole thing together with Teamble. So I think we've got a interesting conversation ahead.
Indeed. So Teamble, why don't you take it from there and give us a bit of your backstory and how did you get to being where you are today?
Right. Well, let me start with where I'm from. I am originally from Turkey, grew up in Turkey. I studied engineering. And as I was deciding what to do with my life and my career out of college, I really wanted to see the world, travel, experience different cultures, different businesses. And consulting seemed like the great opportunity to do that. You could go see different industries, different clients, different countries. And I did exactly that. I traveled around the Middle East, Europe, and came to the US to have my MBA. And stayed here and had a long career in management consulting, about 10 years. And the entrepreneurial bug started itching, and I decided to quit my job and get into building Teamble. And 2 years later, here we are.
Well, that's amazing. I'm interested to understand what inspired you to come up with this concept. There's so many different applications out there. How did you see this as a good one to go for?
So I think there were different stages of the idea and the business kind of growing and evolving. And it was really a lot about my own professional journey too. The whole idea behind Teamble and the essence of it is really help people unlock their potential to the fullest as it is possible. And so in my career, there were ups and downs. And when I look at all of them, I think one of the defining moments was, and I remember it very vividly, my first time in the US after my MBA. I am working at one of the largest consulting companies, the Boston Consulting Group. I'm in the Boston office. I start working 3 months, 6 months in. I'm thinking everything is going great. I've done the job before in another part of the world. I know what I'm doing. And 6 months in, the project is over. I get some feedback, very high level, looks like things are okay, but I can't get into any new projects. Talking with staffing, I'm really interested in this area, that area, but I can't really get into any of the projects I want. And I'm thinking what is going on. And I have a heart-to-heart conversation with staffing that, hey, your performance is not on track. And we actually need to invest or find someone who wants to invest in you. We can't really have you get staffed. So we'll see who really wants to take you. And so it was a very, very bottom moment for me. I thought everything was fine. And here I am, unstaffable. I don't know what's going to happen after that. And I was very lucky. Today, a great mentor and a great friend staffed me on this project, got me under his wings. And we worked for 2 weeks. And he says, let's have a chat. Let's have a 30-minute conversation. Let's grab some coffee. And we talk. And then he lays it all out. He says, look, this is what you're doing. That's not how it's supposed to be. I suggest you do this, you do that. boom, 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 3 points. And it was incredible. I never had that kind of a conversation because it was just coming from where I was coming from. This kind of a feedback culture, this kind of coaching was not really the norm. It was more, people tell you what to do, you go and do it, you execute it perfectly. That's the end of it, right? But things were a little different on this part of the world. You were expected to lead more and so on. And just having that unlock and having clarity on what I was doing wrong, what I was supposed to do, it just changed the whole trajectory. A 30-minute conversation changed the whole trajectory of my performance. And many of those after that, right? Many of those kind of coaching, mentorship. I was very lucky to be working at a company that really valued that and had people who were willing to give you the feedback, give you the coaching. And, I went from being unstaffable to when I was leaving, which was a very hard decision. I was on track to become a partner. I was one of the top performers. So that whole experience, someone who would be seen as unstaffable, bottom of the pyramid, how could that person go to be at the top of the performance chart? That is transformative. And I wanted to be able to provide that kind of an experience to as many people as possible. I think that was kind of the feeling or the initial idea behind Teamble.
Wow, that's so inspirational, Herbal. I mean, it's incredible to be working on a project that is driven by your own experience and your own purpose.
Colleen, maybe there's probably quite a few people listening to this who don't really understand or haven't had exposure to Teamble. Maybe Herbal could just give us like the headline of what it does and what was your intention when you built it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think picking up from the experience I had, right? It happens very rarely. Feedback, everybody wants feedback. Everybody needs feedback. Very few people really gets the feedback they need. So how can we make it more natural, more part of your day-to-day, week-to-week work, make it easy? People are not naturally great coaches or great at giving feedback. How can we nudge them, give them the tools, give them the guides to ask for feedback and give feedback in a place where they really feel like that's part of their day-to-day work? So Teamble is an app that lives within Slack and Microsoft Teams that makes giving and getting feedback very easy, very simple. It's continuous. It's not your once a year performance review, but it really makes it part of your week to week, month to month flow of work. It has a lot of smart nudges, templates to help you go and ask for feedback that triggers an actionable response, or as a manager, it helps you give better feedback. And on top of all that data at an organization level will give unique insights to the leadership around your talent, your skills, your people's performance, their sentiment. It's a very holistic platform that helps companies develop talent, retain them, and also help individuals get continuous feedback to develop themselves.
I remember reading a seminal article for me, which was, I think the author was Anderson, spelt in the kind of Swedish way. And it was really a comparison between veteran therapists and novice therapists. And they compared the efficacy of their interventions. And much to their surprise, they found that the novice therapists were rated better than the veteran therapists. And it was an interesting article, but they boiled it down to kind of one thing, and that is that once people became independent practitioners, they stopped getting feedback about how to, enhance their programs and their processing and the way that they were doing therapy, whereas novice therapists had kind of just come out of studying. They were getting saturation feedback on how to improve. And before they kind of got into the complacency cycle, they were actually at the peak of their game. And I think the point of the article was that once you stop getting feedback, you kind of get stuck. And it really made an impression on me, because there's so much times in business. And if you think of medical practitioners and dentists and like most professions, at some point, they're not getting the volume of feedback that enhances their careers that they should. And I think Teamable offers a solution to that, where you can get continuous feedback on the way that you're performing. And that's what excited me about it and why we wanted to implement it here at Omnicore.
Wonderful. I think very to the point. I mean, I can tell from my even experience as a founder, right? Making a connection to what you described, I was part of a team, a larger company, but when I decided to go and do my own business, I was a solo founder for a while. And in that period, I can go back and see I made the least amount of progress, because on your own, you just diverge into the same thoughts, same patterns, same ways of thinking. Unless there's an external point of view and coming in and helping you converge into other areas, it's very hard to not get stuck, to your point. So that feedback, especially continuous feedback, is extremely, extremely helpful to help you unlock new paths of growth or looking at things differently than you have done before.
And I think it's interesting, Herbal, because as you become more senior in an organization, so people are more nervous to give feedback. And there's this whole, well, this is the boss. We're just going to go with whatever the boss thinks, and we don't want to give any negative feedback. And the one aspect of Teamble that I think is very helpful is that anonymous direct feedback that may allow people to have some psychological safety to give direct feedback to people, which some organizations may not be ready for it in the very beginning, but I find that fascinating.
Right. And a lot of people might also think psychological safety, or an environment where there is psychological safety and the existence of an anonymous feedback, isn't that contradicting? But that's not how the real world works. And there are steps to achieving that level of psychological safety, right? I think the study of psychological safety, initially it was done at a hospital or healthcare clinics, and it was observed where the staff, when they are talking more about their process, what they have done well or not altogether, they were the ones that were being more effective, saving more patients. And that really shows the ideal state is actually an environment where people can speak up freely, right? There shouldn't even be a need for anonymity. But that's part of the journey. That's the goal. And there are steps to get there and mechanisms. And I think anonymous surveys, anonymous feedbacks, making that the starting point is very important. And you can see, I think there are steps to it, right? You could implement anonymous feedback. You could do anonymous surveys, and you gave people an opportunity to speak up in a safe environment. I think what happens next is the most important thing, which is, what does the leadership do taking that feedback? Because if you just ignore it, then you actually put people in a place where it doesn't matter whether it's psychologically safe or not. Whatever you say, there's nothing going to be done about it. So a lot of times what we see in companies, actually, when we do an anonymous survey, when we measure quantitative metrics and KPIs, let's say it comes up at 60%, whatever the metric is, call it ENPS or anything. If the leadership listened to it and acted on it, next time we do the survey, things actually get worse, which is an interesting phenomenon. But what happens is, on the first time, people were actually cautious. They were not sure if people would listen. And they were maybe cognizant of the fact that maybe this is not anonymous. So they're keeping things a little rosy. But when they see, okay, there's actually real change happening, then they become very honest. So on the next survey, they're going to be very, very honest, give you the truth. And on the third survey, things are going, if you keep listening and keep acting, the things are going to get really, really well. It's the same pattern we see over and over. There's research on this as well. It is a very interesting phenomenon of organizational psychology. But it's true. What you do with that feedback really sets the tone of whether you can really achieve psychological safety or not.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something that once it's baked into an organization's culture, that people give each other feedback, you would expect to see some kind of tangible effect in the organization. And I'm wondering what you've seen, or I don't know if you have sight of that kind of data, but what starts happening in organizations to the productivity, the efficiencies in the organization, the outputs, once people start giving each other that feedback? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think the level of ownership increases. People see themselves being heard and also be part of the solution. Let's say there's another company, being siloed was a theme, right? And that was being highlighted a lot in the surveys, and the leadership looked into it and started acting on it. I mean, I think you need to treat your employees as adults, which is a very common sense thing to think of and do, but a lot of companies don't. They think of them as somebody who needs to be taken care of. Well, the people who are telling you the problems already have the answers or a whole lot of good ideas about how to solve it. And when you bring them into the fold, asking them, it really helps drive morale, productivity. Anything that was hindering the productivity is being solved, right? So if silos were issues, now people are acting to fix the silos, and that's going to unlock avenues of productivity. But you start seeing things a lot more on, engagement, people feeling more part of the organization, and retention. The number of people leaving the company starts dropping, and that has a huge impact, right? I think, especially today with the great resignation, great reshuffle, the conversation became very front and center around why people leave, why people stay. When people leave, it's a huge void, right? It's not just you have to go and hire someone, but if that person's productivity, especially if that person was a top performer or someone that drove the culture in a team, when they go, that level of productivity is gone. If they were holding some kind of key IP or client relationship, that is gone. And top performers don't just go alone, right? Other people follow them. They see, if she does not want to be here, maybe there's something wrong. There's doubt in who's staying. Sometimes they take the best people with them. So now you have a huge hole in your organization, and the people who stayed now have a lot more work to do, a lot more burnout cases, and it's taken longer to hire new people because where the market and talent is today. So it's kind of a death spiral, and avoiding that is the biggest outcome, right? Having people stay, be engaged. That's the biggest thing you can do for your organization and your culture.
So, Herbal, I was wondering, what has been the biggest challenge for you as you have gone about building the business?
Yeah, and interestingly, it's also talent, right? Finding the right people, especially on these very early stages of a startup over the last 2 years, I think. Finding the right people with the right motivation, and working with very little structure at this stage, right? There are no organizations. There are just responsibilities and people who own them in a very fluid way. And as a founder, you always think, this is the best thing you can do with your life. Why wouldn't everybody want to do this? But if you think about it, it's a very crazy thing to do as well. And not everybody wants to take this kind of risk or work at this kind of pace. So you really need to be, I think, learning who to work with, who not to work with. That has been my biggest learning. Because I came from an environment where best people wanted to work there. There was a very rigorous process of vetting people, and then a lot of structures after that to kind of define people's career growth and journey. It doesn't necessarily apply when you're a small startup, right? And learning how to hire people, how to talk to them, to a startup or to your idea at that point has been the biggest challenge. It continues to be a big challenge, right? You need to grow fast, hire the right people. So I think a lot of factors drive why people want to work with you. And I think the most important thing is having a clear vision on what you want to do, and are people really aligned with that? Are their motivation is really aligned with that? One of the greatest examples was, and this is something that I was coached, is when you're hiring people, give them two offers. One where the salary is higher, but the equity is lower. And on the other hand, salary is way lower, but the equity is even more higher. Always go with the person who wants to get the higher equity and lower salary, because they are invested in the company's future, not just the short-term cash flow. And I think both of those salaries should be reasonable and very competitive anyways. You shouldn't be offering below market, but just see what the motivation is. And I think that has been a great learning.
Yeah, it's always your best staff are the people who kind of show up to work as if it's their own company. And I mean, I've certainly seen that at Omnicore where people take such ownership of
Right.
their area, and it's really gratifying. But I mean, Herbal, like you're embedded in Slack and you're embedded in Teams. How difficult was it to get that? I mean, from a startup and from nowhere, you became connected to these really well-established products and services. How did you pull that off?
Yeah, a lot of sweat and tears and pain. First of all, I think how we approached building our product and our company, we did it the right way. I think we did a crawl, walk, run kind of an approach. We started with small tests and pilots. We didn't start as a Slack or Teams app to begin with. We were a web application, a separate application that you would have to log into, sign up, and do all that. And starting small with a couple of companies, organizations in our network to see and have that experience and listening to their feedback. When we were doing these things, these small experiments, this was pre-pandemic, right? It was really the initial ideation stage of Teamble. And some of those organizations used Slack. Most didn't. There was one that used Microsoft Teams, which was just a luck on our end, to be honest, because nobody was using Microsoft Teams at that point. And I think you really need to be careful about the kind of feedback you listen and take in and run with, and just separate the noise from the real data. And a lot of themes started coming up around Slack and Teams. Oh, this would be great if this just pinged me on Slack, or I could just do this on Slack as well. Or could this do something on Microsoft Teams? So just listening to those little cues to, okay, how should we really define the user journey? I think that helped a lot. And it positioned us when remote work shift happened and tens of millions of people started flowing into Slack and Microsoft Teams. We were well positioned to be there, and just listening to our very early users and what they wanted helped on that. And yes, it was a long and difficult. These are not skills you can easily find out there in the market, right? People who are able to code a product on Slack or Microsoft Teams. These are very unique, distinct environments, different APIs where you need very, very highly skilled people to be able to quickly learn, implement, and build a product. So it was not an easy journey. It is not easy for anyone. But I think listening to our early users' feedback has been the most defining moment for us.
Great. So is that design thinking, that user journey?
Yes.
Is that a whole process of
using? Exactly. I think one of the things, as I started my, journey as an entrepreneur, there was a lot of new things that I needed to learn, old things that I needed to unlearn, learning about design sprints, sketching out crazy eights. All that process has been something that we applied and continue to apply over and over. They exist for a reason.
So once you had kind of done the API with Teams and with Slack, and you started building up traction with your existing client base, did you hit some kind of tipping point where it suddenly everything was going smoothly? Or, like where are you as an organization now? Are you still in a building phase, or, have you done most of the work? How do you see it panning out?
I think you can never call it done. You can never say like, hey, we're done. This is the product. There's always an evolution of it. I think we have definitely completed certain stages. First part of our journey was, let's build an incredible app that's going to make it very easy to give and get feedback in an organization, make feedback very continuous. So that we have done. We have a product on the Slack store, Microsoft Teams App Store, that is very well reviewed, featured many times. It's one of the top apps, number one feedback and engagement app in both platforms. So I think, can it be improved? Definitely. To this day, we're getting a lot of feedback from our clients on how to define, make better, improve the user journey. But the core of it is that part is complete. The second phase for us was then, okay, so we have this very unique tool into an organization's workflow, right? And we're creating new data around people's responses to surveys, people's feedback, people's interactions on Slack and Teams. How can we use this data to provide the insights to organizations? So how can we go from the top app to a top people analytics platform? And that phase is where we are in. And I think we have made tremendous amount of progress on that too. And to me, that has two stages. One, from an analytics perspective, things that are more prescriptive. Let me help organizations show a moment in time or the past data in ways that's going to be very insightful. Show them the results in heat maps, show them the results in charts, extract information in ways that are going to be really helpful for leadership to act on. Not just top leadership, but a manager of a team as well. I think that first part is pretty much complete as well. The second part is predictive. That's where we're going to right now. How can I show and give clues to things that might happen before they happen? Which department is at risk of burnout or high churn? Which individuals are really critical to our organizational network? They hold central roles. Their sentiment has been deteriorating. This person is at high risk of attrition. And here are some of the things that you could do using our tools, right? Do you have a one-on-one setup with this person? Is this person getting enough feedback? Is this person on a equity plan that's, highly valuable? Like, give the insights and actionable items to see where's my critical talent and am I at risk of losing them? So that kind of a predictive insight engine is the next stage of our journey. And it's very exciting. We're piloting it with very, very large clients and organizations to give them those kind of insights, because that's really what the impact is, right? Can I develop my people to help unlock their potential, have them be much better? The journey that I had, right? Can I take my people from the underperforming quartile to the top performer quartile? And when I identify those people, how can I keep them longer? If I can give you insights and help you do that, then that's true value. 50 million people left their jobs in the US last year alone, voluntarily. They just quit. And when someone leaves, because of all the reasons I mentioned you earlier, what happens when they leave, it is estimated 1 to 2 times their annual salary is the cost up to an organization. If you're paying someone 100K, when they leave, it's a 200K hole until you find a replacement, train them. Other people have left. You have to find roles for them too. So it's $1 trillion of loss just in the US economy. And this great resignation have been happening worldwide. So we're addressing that head on. Retention and attrition. Where's the risk? How can I intervene?
Herbal, I think the Great Resignation hasn't yet hit South Africa, as far as I know, but we definitely are struggling with recruitment and skills. There's a bit of a fine balance between a regrettable loss and then obviously retaining those who you want. And I read an interesting article about kind of the dark side of engagement. And that sometimes this push to keep everyone happy and are they growing and are they all of these things, and that we do need a little bit of discomfort, because sometimes as a leader you feel you do so much and it doesn't always please everyone all the time. So it's a bit of an art as well as a science around who do we reward, who do we keep. And then I guess that bit around, okay, so I've identified that there's a problem with your performance now. How do we take that into a performance conversation? That would be an interesting addition to Teamble.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of things in life is 80-20, right? You can't make everybody happy, and you have to really place your bets on who is the critical talent that I have to be paying a lot of attention to. Ideally, I do not want to lose anyone, and everybody adds value. But there are some people in the organization, if they leave, it is going to be catastrophic, right? It could be the developer that wrote the first 5,000 lines of my code and nobody else knows about, right? That person could be a low performer, might not even be showing up to work, but I cannot lose that person. I need to know that, as well as the developer who's just delivering everything at 10x speed, right? So I need to know that those two people are the people I cannot afford to lose, and I need to focus my attention and time on the acting side of things. I think you need to be listening to everyone and seeing what everyone is. But when it comes to action, you're right. I think there's a 80-20 on where you focus your efforts and where do you really drive the organization towards. Look, I think there's also a point of view around this is not just HR's or people or operations job, right? This is not something that just a CEO needs to think about or a CHRO needs to think about. You need to enable people in the managerial level. It's their people they're losing in the end as well, right? So they need to be tooled to better listen, better coach, and engage and keep their people engaged as well. So I think idea around Teamble being very integrated in Slack and Teams, and we're not just a notification or data reading engine in Slack. We are a set of managerial tools as well, right? As a manager, you can also do these surveys or give feedback or ask for feedback. It's an all hands effort, right? Maybe you are worried about that 5 critical talent, but all the managers should be worried about all their talent and how they can improve them and how can they create an environment where people want to stay.
That's so true, and it's so inspiring. I'm excited to see what happens at Omnicore since we're just launching.
Yeah.
I think it also is just a reminder to leadership because sometimes you only think about this when you're doing your check-ins, and it definitely will change the whole, idea of how to support your staff.
Yeah, and the challenging thing is this is a little bit like exercising, right? You know that if I go and do 10 push-ups or go to the gym today, not much is going to change today. But if you keep doing it, you will be in shape or you'll stay in shape, you'll be healthy. And if you don't, you won't be, right? But in my day-to-day, I'm not thinking about exercise all the time, right? I'm thinking about it when I'm feeling uncomfortable in my clothes or when I can't fit into that tuxedo I have to go to my friend's wedding. Like those are the moments. And it's the same way. When someone leaves, you're remembering, I should have done something. I should do something about it. But your day-to-day, it's selling, it's working with clients, it's doing all of that. So a lot of times people leave this to be an afterthought, but actually it should be something that is top of mind. And just like exercise, you should have the practices, the processes and enablement, that makes it part of your week to week. How can we make it much easier, right? Just like everybody's trying to make exercise easier. I think this is in a similar way. How can we make it easier for you to do the right things to help develop your people, listen to your people? And a lot of times there's a huge gap, right? One of the things that reveals about Great Resignation, I think, revealed about the organizations is there was a research done by, I believe, McKinsey around, they went and asked thousands of organizations, the people, what do they value? The employees, what do they value? What are the top 5 things that they really care about versus what does the employers think their employees think the top 5 things are? There's a huge gap. Employers think it's about the vacation days and flexibility. And on the other hand, the employees think it's number 1 is growth opportunities. Number 2 is flexibility. So there's always a gap. The companies does not know what their people want. And there's not a universal answer of what does your people want. You can go and read all the research. Every one of them is going to say something different because your companies are different, your organization, your people are different. So you really need to build practices, this exercise muscle of how can I listen to my people better? How can I understand continuously in a continuous fashion, see where they are, what they want, and am I giving them the right things, right? In our clients too, we see a lot of times an organization can feel the burnout, feel the complaints in calls on Zoom, and they, let's just go do an outing. Let's go sail. Let's go do this. But unless you really ask them what's the issue is, and we did ask them what the issue is, and the issue was lack of feedback, lack of career paths and a proper performance review structure, and siloed organization. So like sailing is nice, the outing was fine, but you didn't solve the silos, you did not solve the lack of feedback. So you have to be building these muscles of how can I listen to my people, how can I hear what they want and act on that personalized level of what they need.
Yeah, I think we're living in dramatic times and the world of work is shifting around us as we speak. And I think your product in this world of remote work has really come of age because the opportunities we used to have when we were in personal contact to give each other feedback, even though we may not have utilized them as much, were certainly much more overt. And now that we're becoming increasingly disconnected just in terms of how often we see each other, and even I can see in our organization, which is very small, we're employing people who don't work in the same city as us. There's digital nomads who may not even be in the same country as us. I wonder how this trend is going to evolve. What is the workplace of the future?
Yeah, great observation. I think to the first part, Hilton, I just wanted to mention that I hear a lot of my colleagues, clients, they complain, you start the day, you're on a video call, and then the day ended. You were just in calls, video calls, one after another. And if there was any moment of camaraderie or apprenticeship coaching, they're just gone, right? There's no time left for that. Anytime scheduled, they fall off the calendar too because something pressing came up, right? There's none of those, let's walk to the office, let's take a coffee, let's have a chat, just like they just disappeared. So we need to really find a different way that reflects the way we work, right? And we work in Slack, in Teams, in Zoom, and all these other tools. So it really needs to be embedded into that. And in terms of where the future goes, I think there are two themes. One is around how can we make the virtual world mimic the real one as much as possible, right? Through this conversation around the metaverse, you'll be joining meetings in a VR world, and it's going to be as realistic as possible. That's to be seen. It could very well be the norm or part of your day-to-day, and it will maybe come very close to being in person in real life. And yes, a lot of these tools, I think, will be enabling those conversations, right? Be it breakouts. How can we, in this virtual new world, recreate those natural moments of, are we actually going grabbing coffee? Are we actually having a one-on-one on the virtual world too? How are we doing it? So that's still to be seen, but I think there's a theme there that's emerging and being invested a lot in as well. And then the second one is the notion of hybrid, where you don't just disappear fully remote, right? You find the right moments of getting together in real life, very purposefully, but in a different cadence. Maybe now it's once a week or once a month or a couple days a week. It's going to be very hard to tell people where they should live and they should come to the office, I think, especially if you want to find the talent and keep them. I'm not saying everybody wants this, by the way. Like me personally, I have to come to an office. Like my home life with a baby and a second one on the way is pretty chaotic. So I need my time in the office to really focus. And it's a preference I have, but I know a lot of people prefers the other way around too, right? So there's no clear cut of everybody wants this or everybody wants that. So creating more flexibility in between the remote world and in real life, I think that's where the world is right now, and that's where it's going.
As we come to the end of the podcast, the one question I wanted to ask was the mentorship you're getting from Adam Grant. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering how that came about and what's it like and what are your key learnings in that mentorship relationship?
Yeah. So I met Adam at Wharton School, and that's where I had my MBA. And this is back in 2011. So I don't think he had any books published by then. He was still the youngest professor tenured in the US, probably maybe in the world, and was very well respected and loved in the faculty. He gave one of the welcome week, one of the speeches in the auditorium. And then he said something along the lines of, look at each other, but I also want you to look at all the empty seats. I mean, this is like a huge auditorium. It's thousands of people. He said, we could have filled all of these seats, but we did not purposefully because we wanted you. We wanted the right people. And then that was so, I think, moving for everybody. And that really made an impression. And he's brilliant. So anything he says will make an impression. And then him teaching some of the organizational psychology classes. And then outside of it, I was part of a leadership program at Wharton where I was on the board of a nonprofit in Philadelphia. And that program basically placed MBA students into nonprofit boards and had them help provide work and help to these nonprofit organizations. And Adam was part of that program. He would give us coaching. I mean, Adam has done a lot on organizational psychology, defining what work is. And he has been, I mean, everything that we're talking about over the last 2 years, he has ideas and visions about all of those being baked for decades. So we always had those kind of conversations about, 4-day work week, even years before, and how to keep people motivated. And then that continued after school. He had some email lists where he would keep people updated that he knew from school about upcoming books or podcast episodes. So we would always exchange emails. When I decided to leave BCG and start Teamble, he was one of the first people I pinged with the idea. It was a big moving piece for me. If Adam believes in this and agrees to advise me on this, I think I'll go do this. Then I think it's a good idea. And he did. And then that was one of the biggest reasons I started it. And since then, has been tremendous in setting the vision, defining the vision, and helping that vision turn into a product, right? In features or in guidelines, in questions, all of that. And if you're following Adam, you'll see anything that he tweets. He just doesn't share ideas. He also shares ideas baked into real scientific proof. So he shows the research or the analysis after it. I think that's his greatest powers. He speaks truth to the power and he does it scientifically. So because he's a scientist. And I think that has been extremely helpful, because if he's saying, well, look into this or read this article or go do this, it's already highly, highly baked and highly effective. So you don't have to do a lot. You just need to go and execute. And he's been tremendously helpful personally and to us as an organization.
Such a privilege, and obviously very important work that you're doing. So it's amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess maybe a last question from me. Based on what you know and what you've learned, what would be your greatest caution that you would offer to any organization, just in terms of the way it functions?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes an organization and its leadership can do is take people for granted and have the confidence or maybe hubris to think that I know what's best for people. Here's your culture, here's your pool table, here's your happy hour, and you should be appreciating it. That's probably the biggest mistake. I think it should be the other way around. I think the biggest mistake you can do is not building these avenues of two-way conversation with your organization at scale and at one-on-one. Have these moments of asking people what they want, what should we do? And again, it's not a what do you want? It's more of a what are we doing wrong? What should we be doing? What should we start, stop, and continue doing is one of the best questions you can ask your people. And I see very few people doing that. More and more people are doing it, but enabling these conversations, I think, is the most valuable thing you can do to start, right? I mentioned not acting on them is probably the second biggest sin.
Well, there's so much more we could ask, Gerbil, but we're out of time. It's been fascinating to chat to you. And we look forward to using Teamble and being that kind of organization that asks those questions and not just do the sailing trips, although those do sound good too. But thank you so much for all your time and for sharing so generously. We will definitely look forward to seeing the results in the organization.
It was wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to our continued partnership.
Thanks, Gerbil.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. We really hope you enjoyed the episode. It would help us a lot if you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars if possible, and check out our website, www.omnicore.co.za. You'll find our previous episodes and other blogs and helpful resources. And we look forward to connecting in the next episode.